Good evening. This is Jared with Real Building Blocks. And this is our first overview lesson. And we're going to cover at a high level what the various elements are before we start diving into each one of them individually. So there are 6 elements and then 2 bonus elements that go into this framework. And so I'm going to go over them real quick and kind of break down at a high level what each one of these elements are. So let's just jump right in. All right. So the first element is called branding. Within branding, you have 4 subsets, 4 subcategories. The first one is your brand message, then your brand image or identity, then your brand audience, who's your target audience, your customer avatar, different things like that. And then finally, the problems that you solve for said audience. And so all of these elements, there's actually more elements of branding. I haven't really included things like packaging and signage and things like that, but those are also included in branding. Those are part of your image and keeping your brand consistent across all mediums. But nonetheless, those are the elements within branding. And so as we dive into the branding phase of the content, that's actually going to be pretty well received. The next element, number 2, is called traffic. And so traffic is covering all of the aspects, excuse me, of getting people to your website, right? And that's going to cover 4 categories that we have: advertising, search engine optimization, affiliates and influencers, and then media appearances. So, paid advertising, organic options, and then the influencers and media does another double tap for driving traffic as well. So a lot of people put a lot of focus into funneling traffic to their website or their landing page, and that's all fine and dandy. You want to funnel traffic, but you have to funnel the right traffic. You can't just, this isn't a spaghetti business, right? And I say that in the sense of um, old school cooking spaghetti is to take the noodle and throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks. If the noodle sticks to the wall, then that means the noodles are ready to eat, right? This isn't what we're supposed to be doing in business. We're not supposed to be pulling in, 100 million people to try to go into our website. No, that's where that whole brand targeting aspect comes into play. And so we can only focus on the people who have a high probability to actually buy our services or product. And so once we have identified that target, then we can focus on funneling them into our website and driving traffic. And so a higher number of traffic gives us a chance for a higher number of conversions, closing the sale. So that's why traffic is important. And so we'll dive into traffic a lot more as we get to that element, a little more detail. The third element is conversions. Conversions covers 3 primary aspects, 3 primary subcategories. The first one is user interface. The second one is user experience. And the third one is conversion rate optimization. So user interface. User interface is traditionally part of software and web-based software where all of the various elements on your website look the same, right? So all of your buttons look the same. The way that you have, if you have a set of grouped elements like an image, a heading and some text for a paragraph, it all looks consistent. These are various different types of user interface components or elements. And having a consistent look to all of these things creates more consistency for your brand. whether that's going to be on your website or whether you're going to be applying that to like social media posts, imagery, and videos. Having that consistency for all those pieces that you plug in it is going to increase the user experience as a whole. So that's why that's an element there. But the actual user experience component ties in a lot of emotional and feelings type of things. It's kind of hard to explain. Excuse me. It's kind of hard to explain because everyone experiences things differently. And so the only way to really tap into an experience and get a consistent response is to focus on the same type of people. And by type of people, we're looking at demographics, which again ties back to your target audience. So if you only focused on uh, one age group with one level of education, with one zip code, with one type of job, right? All of those hyper specific into the, the type of person that you're looking for. So it's basically using all these demographic data points to try to tap into a personality. And when you get to that personality, um, with everyone having the same even playing field, you can then measure how people respond more accurately to all of the stuff that you put on your website. And it's a lot of psychological components, a lot of behavioral analysis type stuff that goes into this, which we'll dive more into as we get there. But it's really interesting to see how we can make the experience better for customers. And unfortunately, that also includes um, something more complicated called ADA compliance, which is the Americans for Disabilities Act. So all handicapped personnel trying to use a website also ties into user experience, but we're actually going to extract that ADA compliance and plug that into the website segment itself. So we're not going to tap that into the UX as a whole just because there's an extensive amount of regulatory guidance that must be gone over. And so we want to make sure we don't skip any of that because it's highly important. Excuse me. So the final element of the conversion bracket, if you will, probably should hammer down some consistent terminology. Um, the final subcategory of the conversion element is the conversion rate optimization. And a lot of conversion rate optimization is just based on monitoring what people do. That's like half the battle. If you're monitoring what people are doing, then you can figure out what's going on. So some of that's going to entail um, tracking the mouse of what people do, tracking how people scroll down the page, tracking things like where they click on the page. Uh, these are various different metrics that can be utilized to build user profiles and how people interact with your actual website. Tracking them from one page to the next page to the next page helps you understand what the natural thought process is for the people visiting your website. And the whole idea of this is to point them where you want them to go. If you want them to go to the checkout page, you have to get them as fast as possible from new person into the website to checkout. And if you can do that in 3 clicks or less, then you're doing well. And that's the whole concept is minimize the amount of clicks to increase the experience. So all of that is tied in together. There's another aspect of CRO that is basically it's called split testing or A/B testing. So basically, you test different versions of content or page structure to see what people react to. So a lot of these different things are going to generate, um, they're going to generate numbers very differently based on what you're actually changing. But the idea is for you to make one change, test it, see how it plays out, and then pick the better choice between the two. And then make another change, test it, pick the highest performing choice between the two. So basically, you're consistently testing and making small tweaks and modifying and monitoring. And it's just like search engine optimization. It's a never-ending process. You're always trying to, squeeze that next inch forward, which could be the difference between 5 sales and 100 sales. That could be the difference, especially if your traffic is tapped into that as well. But the beautiful thing about conversions is not everyone's tracking it. Everyone and their mother is focused on traffic, but not everyone's focused on conversions. So through this framework, if you follow it and if you learn from it and you do everything from it, just naturally, you're going to know more than a lot of your competitors. And you're going to be able to achieve more than a lot of your competitors. That's just the reality of it. So conversions, it's a beautiful thing. I've done some CRO and some UI UX for various different projects, and it's a costly service. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of data and there's a lot of testing, so it's very time intensive. Just like SEO, search engine optimization, it's time intensive, and that's part of why it costs so much to get done. So anything worth having is never easily earned, and it's no different in business. Any service worth paying for is not going to be cheap. So let's move on to the next element. Element number 4 is called outreach. And so outreach has 4 subcategories. They are email, which is your email marketing, text, which is your SMS marketing, social, which is social media, and then events, which covers all of your in-person, your webinars, your virtual summits, all of those things. So the whole premise of outreach is connecting with the people, right? Under email, that's your email marketing. So you're looking at your how to write good emails that get people to click on a button that go to your site or something like that. You're looking at how to design an email that matches your brand, but also applies those conversion techniques and branding techniques to really get people to do what you want them to do, which is to click on something, to open the email, to read it, to click on something. That's always the goal, right? The goal should never be to open the email and read and close the email. That serves no purpose. Everything you do has to be to drive people to your website, and the outreach element is no different. So that's the email marketing aspect. The next one is your SMS marketing. So you can send out text messages in bulk, and if you've signed up for Gary V's community text group, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He's always sending out links to a page for you to look at, and it's the same thing as email. It's just in a shorter form, kind of like the difference between a tweet versus a Facebook post or a blog post. The next one is your social media. So as we all know, social media has taken over the world, and it's changed the way that everyone does business, and that's not a bad thing, but you have to make sure that you leverage it properly. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm not a social expert. I know the principles and the tools and the techniques, but I don't put a lot of focus into it. Only recently have I started using it, and it's been highly effective. So I'm going to keep using it. realistically, you want to look at Facebook, obviously. You want to look at Instagram, Twitter, especially if you have a younger audience, and then also different video-based platforms like Snapchat, TikTok, Pinterest. If you are doing crafts or DIY stuff, or really anything that has good imagery for your products. So really, we're going to look at what platforms should you be using, and then how should you be using them. And then we're going to eventually go into some tools to help you with your posting options as well. And then the final piece is your events. So I can tell you right now, events are the bread and butter. And here's why. With an event, people don't host events to sell things. Events are used for selling, period. Whether you're going to sell access to the event, or you're going to use the event to then sell a service or a product, events are used for selling all the time. And part of that selling is going to be data collection, right? You're going to collect names, numbers, emails, sometimes an address, company information, depending on what type of event you're doing. It's going to kind of promote what type of data you're collecting. But most of the time, email is included in everything in today's world, so expect to include email. And if you're also tapping into that SMS marketing, definitely capture their cell phone number as well. But nonetheless, events are a powerhouse for you. You want to use events to drive lots and lots of traffic, to do a mass collection of people that are in your that could potentially buy your service or products or whatever. And what's really unique about events is you can group them together with other people more effectively than some of the other options out there. So if you host a summit, a virtual summit, and you pull together, 5 people from your industry, so all 5 of them and you can now promote this, and you have some sort of agreement where everyone gets the email list, something like that. And so the potential for you to get 10, 25, 50,000, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000 emails from a summit is crazy possible. And that's why people do it, because it's highly effective. So once we get to that element, it's going to be really exciting. We're going to play with a lot of cool tools. We're probably even going to do a summit just to show you guys what that looks like and what the data is and stuff like that. So that is everything under the outreach element. So the next one on our to-do list here is element number 5, operations. And so operations covers your systems, your software, your workflow, and your process. So the systems that you use is not necessarily like a computer system. It could be physical system, or it could be like a framework that you use. For example, if you have a manufacturing company, you'd want to use something like 5S, and you'd want to use Six Sigma. Those are systems. 5S is a system for safety. Six Sigma is a lean production management system for making sure that inventory arrives when you need it, so you're not keeping inventory on hand all the time, which is a kind of a bad concept, because raw materials can become obsolete and stuff like that. But figuring out what these systems are and making sure that they're running as effectively as they can be is that subcategory of this operations element. The next subcategory is software. So under software, we're going to have lots of different types of software. We're going to have desktop, mobile, and web-based software, and they're all going to have different purposes. But you want to make sure that you're not overusing software or underusing software. So part of that's going to require some type of an audit on your part to then determine that what you're using is the best effective solution for your operation. And it's really hard to look at this and say, is this the best solution? You know, at a widespread audience like this. But that's something that you guys need to do. Realistically, I've done this for businesses before, and I've helped them with this, and every business is different. There's going to be some businesses in the same industry that can utilize the same software and achieve the same goals. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to two things: workflow and process, because every company has different workflows and different processes. It doesn't matter what you think, unless we're talking about OEM, you know, industry certification type manufacturing. Everything is going to have its own type of process and workflow. So that's where you're going to have to dig deep. You're going to take a hard look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, and see if that's the best way to do it. And it's really hard to take a hard look at yourself and do that. So it's going to be real interesting once we get to that element or that subcategory. But it's also highly rewarding. So the next item is workflow. So workflow is kind of like a subcategory to process, right? Process talks about in what order do we do things, and workflow talks about how do I get that work done. So it's like a sub-element of process. But having a good workflow means that you're able to be effective whenever you're doing your work. That includes things like limiting distractions, using the proper tools, and having the proper knowledge to actually execute the work and make sure that how you're actually doing the work is the best way to do it, which still ties back into the other three elements realistically. But yeah, it's exciting to see how workflow happens. One of the ways that you can track workflow is there's software that you can actually get that records everything that you do on your computer. And so you can actually monitor your workflow, everything that you do, all the software, everything. Just record your whole screen, and it'll create a log, and it'll show you how you're doing work. And you can use stuff like that to help optimize your workflow, help make it better. You know, maybe something as simple as, you know, grouping. Let's say you have 5 tasks every day that are in system A, and it's in the system A, and it's in the same place within the system. It's just plugging all that information in at 5 different times of the day. Well, if you could group that entry of those 5 different pieces, then that would speed up that time. That would reduce the amount of time needed for you to actually do that work. So grouping similar tasks is a workflow optimization concept that you can use. There's lots of different stuff that's out there, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but the whole premise is to apply something called continuous process improvement. Always look for a better way to do the same work, right? So that's tying into your workflow. And then the final piece is the process. So one thing that I've read is that a lot of millionaires will attribute success to a single word called consistency. Excuse me. And so having a process and following a process establishes that consistency within your organization. But you got to go deeper, because a process is a living organism. It's going to live and die and breathe, and it's going to evolve over time. And you have to be ready to adapt when that happens, because if you're applying those continuous process improvement principles, which all fall under the operations element, then you're going to always be looking for a better way. I don't say you're going to always be looking for it. You're going to always be conscientious of, can I do this better? Is there a better way to do this? Can I automate part of this? Can I farm some of this out? Is this work? Myself and this person over here are doing the exact same work. Why don't just one of us do that work? There's a lot of different areas where you can optimize the process. But realistically, if you don't have a process, then there's nothing to make better. And so the biggest proponent of this is to actually establish a process. And so once we get there, we're going to look at various different tasks. Probably I might even take some user input on what type of tasks, what type of tasks you guys do. Excuse me. And we'll see if we can actually build a process for those tasks. So it's pretty exciting. It's dry. It's dry and it's boring. But once you actually establish a process and then you follow that process, you'll begin to see what works and what doesn't work. And then you'll be able to update it, make it better, make it faster, make it more efficient. And that's the beauty. That's the beautiful, interesting piece of the process. All right, moving on to our final and sixth element, the people. So the people has 4 categories within it: staffing, training, integrity, and culture. So staffing, just like it says, staffing, it's hiring people. But it's more than just hiring people, it's hiring the right people. So you have to establish rules and limitations and procedures and policies for staffing. And you have to do everything that you can do to try to find the right person. Now, you can go overboard and try to dig too deep. There's a little give and take there, but at the same time, you want to do everything that you can within reason to try to find the best candidate for the job every time. And so that's where the staffing piece comes into play. The next one, though, is training. So making sure that your team is trained up, and not only trained in a specific area, but also trained to your standards. First of all, you have to have standards. And if you don't have standards, then what are you training them for? Right? We're not talking about, you have to have a standard for them to meet or exceed or fail said standard. And those standards tie into their performance as well. So you're training them to meet or exceed your standards. Training is a huge, huge thing, and it's crazy boring. It really is. But at the same time, you have to take the time to train your people properly. You just have to. No matter how you want to think about it, you're not always going to be hiring an expert. Even if you do hire an expert, there's still going to be some times when they have to learn, whatever it is that your business is unique for. But you should never, ever bring someone on board without needing to train them ever. You should train them in something. You should train them to your standards. You should train them to your publications, your policies, your processes, your workflows. Train them to work the way that you want them to work. And so it's kind of a big deal. The next item here is integrity. And integrity might sound like it's not, it might sound like it doesn't fit. And, you could argue that quite well. But the reason it's on here is because, excuse me, the reason it's on here is because we want to make sure that our people, our team, maintain integrity. We want them to be honest. We want them to be upfront. We want them to tell the truth. Well, that's honesty, but we want them to tell us when there's a problem. And we want them to tell us that it was their fault when it was their fault. We want them to own up to their mistakes and learn from them. And that's not going to happen unless they have integrity. At the end of the day, that's the most critical personality trait that you will be needing within your business, within your organization. If they have integrity, you can work with that. There's been many times in my career where integrity has been my demise. There's so much intestinal fortitude and integrity within me that I've actually gotten myself in trouble because of it. Like real trouble. It's been bad at times. Even just today, I hit a parked car because I couldn't see, and we got 1.5 feet of snow today, and parking lots are not as clean as they should be. So I ended up sliding into a car, and first thing I did was I called the police. Why? Integrity. I even went up to the department store and had them flag down the owner of the vehicle. And at the end of the day, the guy's like, hey, no scratches, no bumps, no dents, nothing's broken. Don't worry about it. Cool deal. But that's not a decision that I need to make because the damage has already been done. I heard the crack. I stopped the car. I called the police. That's integrity. Knowing that it's going to potentially add points to my license and increase my insurance, knowing that, I still call. That's the kind of people that you want working for you. And the reason why is because they will tell you the truth. You do not want yes men. You want people to tell you when there's a problem. And that's the reality of it. So, integrity. Yeah. And then the final piece is culture. So culture, when you go to college and you're in the business program, you're going to cover this thing called organizational theory, which talks about hierarchies and structures and organizational culture and stuff like that. But there's a whole lot that goes into organizational culture, right? Everything preceding what we just talked about is going to increase your employee churn rate, which is how the rate at which people walk into your company and leave. You hire one, you fire another, or you hire one and another one quits. You're always having to train somebody new. All of that's a part of that's the process, the workflow, the tools. Part of that's the culture. And so this past year, 2020, I put down a lot of time with Andy Frizella and the MFCEO podcast, and I've just soaked up so much information from real people making millions, discussing things like organizational culture. And one of the biggest things that's a key takeaway for me for organizational culture was how you actually talk to your people. And it's so simple. And I actually started doing it myself even before I hired people. And I did that because I wanted to drill it right here, build up that muscle memory. And as soon as I explain it, you'll be like, oh my God, it's so crazy. It's so awesome, right? So as a leader, we never want to, we want to give credit where credit's due, right? So what that means is if, Joe Schmuckatelli on our team did the work that got me praise, then I need to make sure I let them know, hey, that was Joe. Joe's a rock star. He did the work. He's a good dude. Different things like that. Give him the praise, because my job is to help them excel, and that's how leaders should be operating. And so the smallest changes that you can make is two words: we and team. That's it. For a long time, I ran a single person digital agency, and then I heard this, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It really does. And so I started to refer to myself as we and us and our team. I started using this terminology early on. And what that does is that actually changes the mindset. It changes how you perceive things and how you think about things. And so as soon as I actually got to a point where I started hiring people, I was already primed and ready to go with that same language. And so even though I have a team now that I've hired on, I still talk like that. I still promote the team. I still, let people who give me praise, I let them know, like, hey, I'm just giving them what they need to succeed, and then they're doing all the work. These guys are pulling the cart, so to speak. So it's important to build a good organizational culture. And some of these things are going to be easy to do. Some of them are going to be hard. But also a big part of that culture is going to be proper leadership. And we'll definitely be going into that. I know that Andy Frisella promotes the servant leader model. And so that's actually the one that I'm trying to shoot for as well. But no one's perfect. And I'm not perfect. And I'm not even claiming that I'm an expert in all of this shit. But I do know that all of this shit is relevant to your growth. Every bit of it. Every step of the way is tied to these elements. Everything. Right. So, bonus rounds. All right, we're almost done here. So the last two elements for the bonus elements are finance and website. And the reason that those two are not included as a core element, and they're actually ran as they're listed as a bonus element, is because everything else is part of your marketing strategy, part of maintaining everything else is part of your business development strategy and your marketing strategy. We'll put it like that. But your finances are something that you're going to have to keep track of. You need to know how much money you have, how much you spent. Do you cut costs? Do you streamline, processes, different things like that? And you're never going to know that without finances, without knowing exactly how much money you have. And it's crazy important to track that. So, finance. And then the last element is your website. So the reason that the website is not a core component is because all of these things get applied to the website. The website is just a vehicle for you to put your 22s on and, play loud music, tint your windows. You want to take it a different direction, put a spoiler, throw exhaust on it, beef up your engine. whatever metaphors you want to use, the website is the vehicle, and all of these elements are the parts of the vehicle. And so that's why it's not a core component. Because if you take these 6 elements and you work them individually and you apply them individually to the website, it's going to work for you. It's going to do its job. And that's the idea. Don't put your entire focus on just having a website. Put your focus on building a good brand. Put your focus on generating quality traffic. Put your focus on increasing your conversions. Put your focus on things like quality social media posts, generating events, writing out good quality emails that people are well receiving of, and things that make them want to engage with you. Put your focus into the systems that you use and your process. Without a process, you're dead. Put your focus into a good culture and having good people on your team. You do all of these things, and the website does the work for you. So that's everything that we have today for the overview. In the next lesson, we're going to be diving in to the first sub-element, the first category within the branding. We're going to be doing branding for a bit, but it's going to be worth it. So if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, throw them below, and we'll do some gangster shit to try to fix it. All right. Till next time, guys, happy coding, and these are the real building blocks.